Well, what God has joined together has become the new focus by the media in the political campaigns. That's right. The spouses of the candidates are getting much more scrutiny, sometimes just as likely, if not more, to make those headlines. GOP strategist Karen Nessel says this is a change from past campaigns, and she joins me now from our D.C. bureau to explain. Welcome, Karen.
Thanks, Lauren. Glad to be here.
Yeah, well, it's great to have you here. Now, so why is it that spouses are getting so much more attention than in campaigns past?
Well, I think it's because their role is changing. I mean, as the media landscape changes, the candidates are more stretched than ever, and who to be a better surrogate for the campaign than the spouse? And so they're getting more exposure, and with that exposure comes more scrutiny.
You know, there was a recent Fox News Opinion Dynamics poll, not Opinion Dynamics poll, but the poll of the primary voters on looking at the GOP candidates. Romney is still out ahead, 18%. Rick Perry, who's not a declared candidate as far as I can remember, he's got 13%. Bachmann's down to 11%. Giuliani, 10%. You know, all of them have basically very good home lives. How much can the spouse contribute to a candidate becoming popular or not popular?
Well, I think the way you have to think about it is, you know, voters make a gut instinct about candidates on sort of three basic levels. Do I like them? Do I trust them? And do they care about the same things that I care about? Do I relate to them? And I think when you look at those factors, the spouse, especially in a primary situation where on the issues the candidates there isn't that much difference, the spouse really can become a determining gut factor for voters on those issues of likability. And are they like me? Do I relate to them? Do they relate to me? I think when you see a candidate with their spouse and how they relate to one another and sort of how they live their lives, those are things that voters get a gut instinct about. And I think that's where the spouse comes into play in terms of whether or not a voter considers the spouse part of the equation.
Yeah, when does the spouse, though, become a detriment? Because one of the things that has been bandied around about, particularly Newt Gingrich, is that he's on his third marriage. And whereas divorce is not particularly shunned, I mean, obviously Ronald Reagan was divorced, but this is a third marriage and a marriage to a woman he was having an affair with before. So how much of that can be a detriment to a candidate?
Well, I think generally voters are very forgiving. I mean, these candidates are all humans. They're fallible. They're not infallible. And I think generally voters are fairly forgiving and tolerant of some of those imperfections. But where it comes into play, I think, is again on this likability issue, on this trust issue, and on this are they like me? So for me, if you look at the whole Gingrich campaign as it's played out, for me, one of the biggest factors has been this Tiffany's account, because for a lot of people that's just so not relatable to them. Carrying that kind of debt for something that's that seemingly frivolous. So I don't know that it's the divorces and that kind of thing as much as it is this person like me? Are they going to care about the things I care about? Would they represent someone like me in their role as a leader?
One of the things that's, though, different for particularly women candidates is the husband is taking very untraditional roles as a subservient to his wife. And even though we've come a long way and there was sort of the feminist movement and all that, is that still kind of unsettling for voters when they look at a husband not being in the lead role?
Oh, I don't think so. I think more what it shows you is that we're kind of, this whole political spouse thing, I have to admit from experience, is kind of weird. It doesn't matter whether you're a woman or a man. It's a strange role to be in, because all of a sudden you're sort of not this individual identity. You're sort of much more integrated with your husband or your wife and what they're doing in their career than you would as a normal person. I mean, I can remember having to defend, tax policy in the pet food aisle of the grocery store. If my husband had been in a different line of work, I don't think I'd have to be doing that. So I don't know that it's unsettling whether or not the candidate is a woman or a man and the spouse is a man or a woman. It's just that I think it shows that we're struggling with the roles themselves and how much should we, what's the box we want to keep people in, and is that fair?
Well, it seems as though the candidates and the campaigns have gotten real savvy about the spouse's role, and they're more, choreographing what the spouse does more than ever instead of, leaving it to chance. You see that happening?
Yeah, I actually do a little bit. I actually don't think it's as far along as it should be. I do some work as a consultant to campaigns specifically around the role of the spouse because I don't think they think about it early enough in the campaign. I think they end up in a situation where all of a sudden they have to cover geography in a way that they can't, and they go, oh my gosh, who can we send? And the spouse gets sent in, and all of a sudden they're not ready. And so it gets to be a little bit of a dicey situation. But it's true that as there are more and more demands, as I said already, as there are more and more demands on the candidate, and you can't cover the ground, the spouse becomes the chief surrogate because they're often in demand in and of themselves, and they're often able to carry the message better than almost anyone else, sort of in a different, way as a surrogate than a chief campaign activist or even a staffer.
And what kind of wife, I should say spouse, because obviously, Michelle Bachmann has a husband, but what kind of spouse do voters really like to see? What appeals to them more than anything?
Oh gosh, I'm not sure I'm qualified to answer that question, but I think, again, it goes to this whole, are they like me? I mean, I think you've seen Michelle Obama do this brilliantly. I mean, the fact that she buys her clothes from J. Crew, and, she's really careful about some of the things that she does because she wants people to understand she is one of them. Even though they're in this new role and it's a little bit weird sometimes, but she's just a regular person, and I think that's really what you got to keep it real, and I think that's what voters really respond to.
Well, then, what about the negatives? Because I remember John Kerry's wife; she was a little bit high end, and that a lot of voters just may not have been able to relate to that. Is that accurate? I mean, can a spouse actually become a detriment in that way?
Possibly. I mean, again, I think it goes to the whole "are they like me" thing. I think I've been being redundant on that point, but to me, I thought, Teresa Heinz Kerry was not accessible. And I think there's an accessibility issue too that goes to, are they like me? And I think because she was nervous in the role, she didn't want to do anything to upset the campaign or do anything wrong. And because there is that when you're in that spouse role, you think, oh gosh, I hope I don't mess it up. So there is sort of that fear factor, and I think people just thought she wasn't accessible, so that maybe drove some perception about her that might not have been fair.
And that actually can have a negative effect on the candidate's campaign as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
Well,
and I think you saw that too. Sorry to interrupt you, but I think you saw that too a little bit with Cindy McCain. Cindy, really wanted to be a help to the campaign. She really wanted to support her husband, but she was nervous and she was shy, and people mistook that shyness as an aloofness. And it wasn't fair. But that's the perception that got painted.
I mean, are the campaigns actually creating counseling or campaign advisors for specifically the spouse?
They're not yet. I'm actually trying to change that dynamic because having been in that situation, I felt like there wasn't enough support, not in terms of staff, but just in terms of thinking about where I should be as the spouse, what kind of campaign events worked well for me and my style and what didn't. So put me in a position of strength by putting me in an event that I will be comfortable in, rather than just, oh gosh, who do we have? We'll send in the spouse. Being a little more strategic.
Send in the spouse.
Being a little more strategic about using the spouse asset, if you will, in the right places, rather than just anywhere you happen to need them, and sort of thinking through, what I say to spouses is, look, you get to decide. You get to have a say in the kinds of events you'll do and the kinds of, media you want to do and all that kind of stuff. So if there are certain environments that make you uncomfortable, if you don't like big crowds, then, we can decide to put you in smaller rooms. Or if you'd rather be, doing education events rather than healthcare events, all of that can be decided. It just needs to be decided sooner rather than later in the campaign.
Well, thank you so much. Karen Nessel, GOP strategist, thank you very much for talking to us about the spouse. A lot of people will be watching them in the next few months as we lead up to the 2012 presidential election. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.